So Tanglewood for the Mega Drive is right around the corner now, and I know loads of you like me have been following this game for a couple of years, and if you've been watching for a long time you might remember that I interviewed Matt from Big Evil Corp 2 years ago now on the channel about the game, and he's very kindly sent me a review cart, so we're going to be checking out Tanglewood on original hardware for the Mega Drive.
I played and recorded this game on original hardware, a Model 1 Mega Drive via RGB SCART to an OSSC, then to an AverMedia Live Gamer Portable. Before we begin the review, it's important to remember that Tanglewood was developed for the Mega Drive. So many new Mega Drive games, and games for retro consoles in general for that matter, are ported to them as a marketing tool. See, it's hard to get your PC game to stand out among a sea of indie games available on Steam, so porting it to say a Sega console is a great way to stir up some chatter and let your game gain some traction. Plus, I find that many of the recent Mega Drive game releases are answers to questions that nobody's asked, like ports of old Amiga games that were better originally anyway. Tanglewood was developed for the Mega Drive on an original Mega Drive dev kit, although it has also been released on Steam if you don't have access to the console. It's a real labour of love. It was Matt's dream to develop a Mega Drive game, and that passion is evident in its quality. He gave up a job at a AAA game studio, and I'm really glad he did. Gameplay wise, Tanglewood was heavily influenced by Another World and The Lion King, and was advertised as a mixture of both. I can definitely see their influences shining through, from the gritty, tense atmosphere akin to Another World to the layout and platforming style of The Lion King. What it reminded me of most while playing it though was The Lost Vikings, and I'll explain why a bit later on. You take on the role of Nim, a fox-like character making his way through a woodland landscape that's peaceful and terrifying in equal measures. He's a meek character, which is a nice touch as he feels really vulnerable and scared, and you can't help but share his sense of trepidation when playing. Although meek, Nim is incredibly nimble and can run fast and leap a fair distance. Various enemies are found along the journey, and each must be avoided or killed in some way. One hit and you're dead, so there's absolutely no margin for error here. Smaller animals like the hog will charge at Nim with lightning fast speed, so you have to be really quick on your feet, and the larger terrifying Jack will charge at you relentlessly like the Terminator of the animal kingdom. You have to use traps and hazards to take these guys out, otherwise they'll hunt you endlessly, like dropping a boulder on their head or luring them into a pit of spikes. When I say you have to be quick on your feet, I'm talking pinpoint precision in parts. You'll have to time your jumps exactly to complete some of the sections. Expect to die a lot. Tanglewood really reminded me of modern games like Shovel Knight and Hotline Miami, both of which I adore, in that you'll play one section for ages dying over and over again, but keep coming back for more. I died hundreds of times playing through this, and sometimes 50 to 100 times maybe on one bit. A few times it had me shouting expletives in frustration, but I kept hammering away at it hoping to master that one leap or dodge. And I did. This gives Tanglewood an immense sense of satisfaction, as there's nothing more gratifying than completing a part you've been constantly dying on for half an hour. And that balance between tricky and frustratingly hard is actually pretty hard to achieve, but Tanglewood sits right in that Goldilocks zone. Thankfully there are fairly frequent checkpoints though, so you won't lose too much progress if you die. There are no lives and therefore no limit to how many times you can attempt an area, again just like in games like Hotline Miami. This difficulty was a pleasant surprise as I was expecting Tanglewood to be a complete walkover, but it was damn hard in parts. Where it gets really interesting is with the special abilities that Nim can acquire. These are rewarded when you roll one of these little critters, a fuzzle, back to their nest. They'll thank you by granting you a power for a limited time. Yellow fuzzles will give Nim the ability to glide, green the ability to slow time, and blue the ability to tame the deadly jacks so they can be ridden. There's a fourth ability very late in the game, but I'll leave that one as a surprise. This is where we come back to me saying Tanglewood is reminiscent of the Lost Vikings. You have 3 available powers, and the combination of these is used to solve the puzzles to complete the level. Plus, they're both puzzle platformers, so there are definitely similarities there. The difference being, you're not controlling 3 separate characters, but one that has the ability to acquire each of these powers independently. And this comparison can only be a good thing, because The Lost Vikings is superb, and this game mechanic has been sorely underused over the years. The wood in which the game's inhabitants live is a beautiful and tranquil setting, but when night falls it becomes an altogether more intimidating place, as this is when the wood's most dangerous creatures come out. Some are downright terrifying, while others seem sweet and innocent. You'll soon find out they aren't when they're cornered and turn into ferocious attackers. You'll find various mechanical contraptions along the way, like bridge switches and pulley systems, and these act as puzzles that must be solved to progress, for example by using a fuzzle to power a device or by moving a weight onto a pressure plate. The difficulty starts off easy enough to acclimatise you with the game's mechanics. You'll learn how to earn and use the powers, and get to grips with some basic puzzles involving them. It doesn't take long for puzzles to get harder though, so expect to employ some lateral thinking, and as I said, it can get very tricky, requiring perfectly timed jumps and movements. As the powers have a limited duration, this adds a sense of urgency too. Because Nim is so fast, it's tempting to go hell for leather and run through the levels, but this can often end badly as you'll fall into traps or collide with enemies. The only way to do that would be to learn each level's layout. For that reason, I can see this being a great game for speedrunners. There are 168 fireflies dotted throughout the levels for you to collect. You'll probably find around half of them without even trying, but many are really well hidden or require a feat of skillful agility to obtain, so this adds some replayability to the game. I'll certainly be trying to catch them all Pokemon style in my next attempt. Graphically, Tanglewood feels like a Mega Drive game, as it should, and along with it the colour palette. There's also a level later on which has the foreground entirely in shadow, with an orange sunset in the background, which is one of the most visually stunning segments of the game. Nim is drawn and animated nicely too, having very fluid motion. The music is really understated, it's quite minimal, and in parts there isn't even any music at all, but each piece is strategically placed to suit the atmosphere of the section you're playing. The pace picks up nicely when you're in danger, in particular I like the music from the boss sections, but mostly it's gentle and calm. Admittedly at first I wasn't sure about the decision to include areas without music, but it does work and I didn't really notice its absence. Tanglewood's music for the most part is something you don't consciously notice, but adds to the tranquility or tension when necessary. Tanglewood does have a story which probably starts around level 3 or 4, but I must confess that I found it hard to follow in parts. Perhaps my next playthrough will make it easier to comprehend. There are 8 levels in all, each with 2 to 4 acts. It took me around 4 to 5 hours to complete, but that was without searching for all the hidden fireflies, so expect it to take considerably longer if you do. There's a password save feature so you can begin where you left off last time, and once the game is complete there's a level select option added to the menu. I often back Kickstarters for Mega Drive or Dreamcast games, but sometimes I find myself doing it just to support the scene. Sadly, I'm often disappointed with the final products. I'm very pleased to say that this wasn't the case with Tanglewood. It was an absolute pleasure to play and I really enjoyed my playthrough of this game. It feels like an actual Mega Drive release, which few modern retro console based indie games can boast, and quite frankly this could have sat on the shelf in the mid-90s next to the Mega Drive games of the time, and it would be remembered as a good one. Tanglewood is a must-buy for any Mega Drive fan, and my experience with it has inspired me to also pick up the Dreamcast version when that comes out, which Matt tells me will be even more difficult. There's a link to Tanglewood's website in the description if you want to order a copy, and also the Steam page if you'd rather play it on PC. I can't wait for my release copy to arrive, and it will sit proudly on my shelf with my Mega Drive collection. So in summary, Tanglewood is an enjoyable puzzle platformer, the likes of which there's nothing quite like on the Mega Drive, and comes thoroughly recommended. I can't wait to see what Big Evil Corp does next.